Hello, and thank you for joining me. My name is Jasmine Valero, and the moral topic I'd like to discuss today is abortion. And the reason why I chose this is based off of Mary Ann Warren on the moral and legal status of abortion. The reason I chose this topic is because abortion has been a moral dilemma for so many years, and it's an issue that is considered one of the most difficult moral dilemmas in society because it involves a conflict between two important values, those being the rights of a pregnant woman and the moral status of the fetus. So this is a very contentious issue that a lot of people can argue about, and it's not easy to answer because both sides have a lot of serious ethical concerns. And in Mary Ann Warren's essay on the moral and legal status of abortion, she argues that abortion is morally permissible because fetuses are not persons in the moral sense and therefore do not possess full moral rights in a sense. So this makes a lot of people disagree, and there's a belief that human life begins at conception. And this is why it's such a huge dilemma and argument in society. So they feel that these fetuses deserve protection at all costs. One reason abortion is a moral dilemma is that it involves competing rights and responsibilities. So on one side, a woman may believe she has the right to autonomy of her life, her body, freedom, health, and control of her future. So pregnancy affects a woman emotionally, physically, financially. There's not one thing we can argue that it affects a woman's life in so many ways. So this argue about abortion and the fetus having a right to life, this is not something that is just black and white. We have to look at both sides and see that ending a life is morally wrong and the right to life. So since both of these sides appeal to a lot of moral principles, the issue comes with solving it in a way that everyone can agree on from a moral standpoint. Mary Ann Warren argues that there are conditions for personhood, and there are 5 that are in her category. The first one is consciousness of objects and events, ability to feel pain, reasoning and problem-solving ability, the ability to carry out self-motivated activities, and the ability to communicate messages of an indefinite variety of types. Presence of self-concepts and self-awareness. If a person does not satisfy all these conditions, they will not be considered a person. So, arguing with this, she suggests that a person is only a person if they are of a moral community and if they present all of these 5 criteria of self-awareness, consciousness, reasoning. But that is such a gray area for people who are disabled and people who do not operate in that way or who cannot function in that way. The issue that presents is Warren's 5 criteria for personhood is that her point is that fetuses early on don't have those traits of self-awareness, of communication, reasoning. That doesn't mean they have zero value, but it does mean that they don't have the same moral status as someone who already is a person. And that outweighs those rights. Her argument on abortion, Warren makes a distinction between actual persons and the potential persons. Pregnant people are actual persons, and they have those full rights. Those outweigh the fetuses. So even in later stages of pregnancy, Warren still says the person's rights come first. So for her, abortion is morally permissible. Mary Ann Warren's excerpt brings up a central question that what makes someone a person with full moral rights? And she argues, and I quote from her excerpt on the moral and legal status of abortion. She argues for pro-choice positioning, according to which abortion is always morally permissible. The following argument presents the core of her view. Persons have rights. Fetuses are not persons, but only potential persons. The rights of persons always morally outweigh the right of merely potential persons. So to Warren, fetuses are not persons at that point. They are only potential persons. So she means that the rights of a woman always outweigh those of the fetus. And she feels that women's rights to bodily autonomy and self-determination are something that they are morally permitted to by all means, even if it means death to a fetus. Her argument presents some humans beings are not people, and there may be people who are not human beings. So in order for her to prove that a fetus is not a person, she seeks to claim that any being who cannot meet the characteristics are not a person. So a fetus is not yet a person and does not possess the full moral rights of a member of the moral community. The fetus does not possess the right to live, therefore. And I chose duty ethics to apply to this moral issue. This is the moral theory by Immanuel Kant. And duty ethics is associated with moral duties, rules, and rights rather than the consequences themselves. And this is why abortion is such a complicated moral issue. According to duty ethics, actions are morally right if they follow moral laws and respect human beings as ends in themselves. So this perspective, people who oppose abortion may argue that humans have a duty not to kill an innocent life. If the fetus is considered a person, then abortion could be viewed as violating a moral duty to protect life. This means abortion would be morally wrong, regardless of the consequences, according to duty ethics. But it can also support Warren's argument. She claims that fetuses are not persons because they lack these characteristics of consciousness, self-awareness, communication. If personhood is what gives morals rights, then pregnant women, as a person, have stronger moral rights than the fetus. So, under duty ethics, society has a duty to respect a woman's autonomy and freedom. Forcing a woman to continue a pregnancy against her will could violate her dignity and her right to make decisions consciously about her body. That's why duty ethics applies to this moral conflict. It creates a sort of duty to protect life versus the duty to respect personal autonomy. I want to talk about how virtue ethics applies to this situation as well. It provides another way to understand the abortion debate. Virtue ethics is based on the philosophy of Aristotle. It focuses less on rules and more on character and moral virtues such as compassion, courage, wisdom, and justice. Instead of asking whether abortion is right or wrong, virtue asks about what ethics are good and morally wise a person would do in a difficult situation. So from a virtue ethics perspective, abortion decisions depend heavily on the circumstances and intentions involved. For example, if a woman faces a dangerous pregnancy, poverty, assault, or emotional trauma, they may choose abortion out of responsibility and concern for herself or her future family. A virtuous person would carefully consider these consequences and relationships. These emotional realities are real, and they, are part of virtue ethics because they encourage empathy and understanding towards people who are facing these difficult choices. And this is why it's such a complex dilemma in morals and ethics. At the same time, virtue ethics can also make and encourage respect for developing human life. This applies compassion and leading society to protect unborn children whenever possible. But this shows how virtue ethics can recognize both abortion and the right to life. So it is not a simple yes or no answer. So even though duty ethics and virtue ethics are really different, they both end up supporting Warren's conclusion. Duty ethics focuses on the rights and autonomy of a woman, while virtue ethics focuses on the character. When there's two very different ethical frameworks, it makes the argument stronger, and I think that we can apply both in a very complex way. And why it matters today? We're seeing real consequences in states with abortion bans, higher than maternal mortality, more unsafe abortions, and more financial hardships for families. These aren't issues that are so abstract. They affect people's lives in serious, intimate ways. Real ways that are occurring in our society. And Warren's argument helps us think about why protecting women's rights and autonomy to their bodies, and how we can look for better policies that balance those sorts of rights for women and fetuses. Overall, abortion is a moral dilemma that is complex in itself. It involves deeply conflicting values about life, rights, and the freedom and responsibility of pregnancy and women's rights to life. Duty ethics shows how there's such a conflict between protecting human life and the respecting of their bodily autonomy. Virtue ethics emphasizes the moral character and the wise decision-making of the compassion of the human being. So Marianne Warren's argument applies to both and supports the idea that women's rights outweigh fetal rights because fetuses are not moral people in a sense. However, this debate remains difficult because people disagree about when personhood begins and how much moral potential and value life should have. So understanding abortion through ethical theories helps society think critically about the issues that are occurring and encourages respectful discussion about policies and about the most important questions in modern society, how we can come to a centered idea together for what is right for everyone, in a sense. Thank you so much for joining me on this discussion about abortion and Marianne Warren's excerpt on the moral and legal status of abortion. I really enjoyed this class and thank you for having me. Bye-bye.